Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for another installment of our video PowerPoint series for Unit 7, Genetics and Heredity. Today, what we're going to be talking about primarily is blood typing and something called sex-linked or X-linked traits, or traits that can be found on the X chromosome. So, what we're going to be learning about today is primarily what makes up your blood type and how things like hemophilia and male pattern baldness as well as colorblindness pass through generations. So the classic example of codominance in humans is our blood type. So we've got four different types of blood primarily. We've got A type, B type, AB type, and O type. So the gene that controls the ABO blood type codes for an enzyme that makes the glycolipid on the blood cells. So basically what's going to show up on the surface of the blood. The two alleles, A and B, are codominant. Meanwhile, the third allele, for the sake of argument we're going to call it O, is recessive to both A and B. So A and B are codominant, and if you remember from the last lesson here, codominant means that neither one is fully dominant over the other. So both will show up. However, we know that recessive, in this case O, if O pairs up with A or B is going to show. So the possible genotypes for our blood types. If you have the A blood type, there's two potential options. Your genotype could be AA or AO. If you have the B type blood, or B phenotype, the genotypes that you could have are either BB or BO. Now, if you have the phenotype AB, considering this is codominant, the only genotype option you have is AB, one of each. And much like the AB phenotype, if you have the phenotype of O-type blood, there's only one option you can have, which is the genotype OO, having both of the recessive alleles for your blood type. So the ABO blood system, this is basically how it works. Your blood type is determined by the A and or B proteins on the red blood cell surface. So, if you have A-type blood, if you go ahead and look here, what that means is you've got the A-type proteins on the surface of your red blood cells. If you've got the B-type blood, then that means you have the B-type proteins on the surface of your blood. If you've got the AB blood type, you've got both. And meanwhile, if you got O-type, you have no proteins on the surface of your blood. Now here's where this kind of comes into play. What you also have are a set of antibodies. Now we know about antibodies that if they come in contact with a certain type of protein, in this case, they're going to attack it. Much like how your white blood cells attack foreign invaders like bacteria and anything that can make you sick. So these also have a specific type of protein on them, and a specific type of protein they recognize. With A-type blood, you have the B-type antibodies. So if it notices anything that has the B proteins on it, it's going to attack it. If you've got B-type blood, what that means is you have the A-type antibodies in your bloodstream. Meaning that if they notice the A-type protein on the surface of the blood, they're going to attack it. Now, if you've got AB, you're kind of lucky. If you have AB, you have none of these antibodies in your bloodstream, meaning that you can accept blood from an A-type, or a B-type person, or an AB person, or an O-type person. So basically, they call the AB the universal acceptor. If you're AB blood type, you can accept blood from just about anybody, and your body will not reject it. Now, on the other hand, if you have O-type blood, you have both the A and B antibodies in your bloodstream, meaning that they recognize anything with an A protein on it, or a B protein on it, or even if we have a combination of both, it's going to perceive that as a threat and start to attack it. Now, O-type is often known as the universal donor, It can go ahead and be donated to any type of individual, any blood type, and their body will accept it. However, O-type can only receive O-type blood. The reason for this is because if you look at O-type again, you'll notice that there are no proteins on the blood cell surface, which is good, so that means that the antibodies inside the bloodstream won't attack whatever blood is coming in. So, in summary here, if you got A-type blood, you can receive blood from an A-type or O-type donor. If you've got B-type, you can accept it from either a B-type or O-type donor. If you're an AB blood type, you can accept it from basically everyone. But if you're an O-type, the only person you can accept blood from is another O-type person. So blood tests, the ways to determine what type of blood you have, are done by adding antibodies to the sample, and then going ahead and seeing the reactions. So if we had a reaction with both A and B, that would give us AB blood type. If we had a reaction with only A, that would give us the A blood type. If we had a reaction with the anti-B antibodies, that would mean that we got B type. And if there was no reaction whatsoever, that means the blood type is O. So which blood type would clot with both anti-A and anti-B? Go ahead, think about it for a bit. Now, vice versa, which blood type wouldn't clot with either anti-A or anti-B? So if you go ahead and look close, you'll notice that the one that clots with both anti-A and anti-B is the AB blood type. Meanwhile, the blood type that doesn't clot with anti-A or anti-B would be our O-type. So, do you know what your blood type is? I know what mine is. Now, granted, I'm not going to go ahead and tell you because, quite frankly, at this point, I'm nothing more than a digitized voice that's going ahead and being received through your speakers. So, it probably won't do you much good. Sorry. Now, what we also have inside of our blood is something called the Rhesus factor. Now, that's Rhesus, not Reese's. We're not talking about peanut butter and chocolate here. So, you're either a positive or negative for the Rhesus protein, meaning you either have it in your bloodstream or you don't. If you do have the Rhesus protein, what that means is you would have the positive blood type. But if you don't, you would have the negative blood type. So that's where we get things like A positive, O negative, etc., etc. Now, this could potentially be a problem for mothers that that are lacking the Rh protein. So if they lack the Rh protein, what that means is they've got the antibodies for the positive version of the protein. So if they see that, they're going to perceive it as a threat. Now this could be bad if the baby is positive for the Rh protein. So what that means is, considering when nutrients and blood are being cycled from the mother to the baby, the antibodies in the mother's bloodstream could recognize the baby's blood as a threat and could actually go ahead and start to attack the baby. Now, due to the modern marvels of medical science, we can go ahead and fix this. Doctors can go ahead and give mom a shot of something called Rogam at about 28 weeks. And what that does is it goes ahead and hides or removes the Rh positive cells from mom's bloodstream. So basically, they're going ahead and disguising the baby's Rh blood cells, or Rh positive blood cells, so the mother's antibodies won't go ahead and perceive it as a threat. So let's go ahead and look at a example problem here. If mom is B type and dad is O type, we've got a baby that's AB. Is this possible? So let's say mom is B type. Now anytime you're going ahead and doing a Punnett square and they just give you B type, always assume that it's the heterozygous condition. So basically consider it BO. Now, dad's O-type. There's only one option for that. The only genotype for O-type blood is OO. So like we said before, remember, when in doubt, the heterozygous condition is much more likely. So unless we straight up tell you that their blood type is BB or AA, assume that it's either AO for A-type or BO for B-type. So we know that dad is O-type blood, and the only option for O-type blood is OO. So we go ahead, set up our Punnett square. In our first box, we would get BO, our second, OO, our third, BO, and our fourth, OO. Now, this is where we could run into a problem. The baby is AB. And if you look down here, there's no AB. So basically, is this child his? Nope. Unfortunately, I'm very sorry, that is not possible. Whoopsie doopsie. So these sex chromosomes, these are the 23rd pair of chromosomes in humans. We've got two variations. We've got an X and we've got a Y. If you have the combination XY, that's going to be a boy. Whereas if you have the combination of XX, that is going to result in a girl. So all the other chromosomes, 1 through 22, are what we call autosomes. Basically, these are what go ahead and help your body grow and pretty much give it what it needs. So the sex chromosomes X and Y. The X chromosome has all the essential genes that a person needs to live. So basically what we're saying here is the X chromosome, you can't live without it. In females, the 23rd pair is XX. Now usually one is going to be deactivated because you only need one technically to live. In the meantime, the Y chromosome has very few genes and basically only has one function, and that's to determine if the testes develop in the male. Now with males, the 23rd pair is the combination of X and Y. Now anytime you're going ahead and there's the possibility of having a child, if you go ahead and look, what's the percentages of having a boy or a girl? There's always going to be a 50-50 shot of either being a boy or being a girl when the child is born. So now that we know what the X chromosome is, let's go ahead and talk about sex-linked or X-linked traits. Given by the name, sex-linked traits are found on the X chromosome, not the Y. That's why we also call them X-linked. So with males, they are either affected or they're not. There's no hybrid or heterozygous condition. Now, why do you think that is? Keep in mind these are carried on the X chromosome, and that the male condition is XY. So the main reason why this happens is because males only have one X chromosome. They don't have two. So they either have it or they don't. Whereas females have two X chromosomes. That being the case, they could have a recessive and a dominant allele, resulting in them being normal, but they could be a carrier. So some common X-linked traits are things like hemophilia, where you're missing a clotting enzyme in your blood. So basically what that means is when you go ahead and get cut, over time, you know how it gradually starts to slow down the flow of blood, and you'll eventually stop bleeding. This is what the clotting factor does for your body. Those with hemophilia are missing this, so what that means is it's very hard for them to stop bleeding once they start. Also, colorblindness. There's a wide variety of different versions of colorblindness, from not being able to see colors to confusing other colors with others, for example, confusing red and green, and a wide variety of other options. And there's also the famous male pattern baldness, where you start to go bald far too early. Now, most of these are recessive, meaning that to go ahead and have it, in females you would need both X chromosomes to have it, or you would need to get the one recessive trait from the mother. So with hemophilia, like we said before, the ability to clot the blood is impaired, so it's much harder to stop bleeding. The main treatment for hemophilia is basically replacement therapy, where they go ahead and give you copies, or they go ahead and give you clotting factor that's missing. So they're trying to go ahead and balance out the missing clotting factor. Now, hemophilia is famous because this was the royal disease that was held by Queen Victoria back in the day. Now, this followed the royal bloodline for quite some time. Specifically, the males were affected the most. Why? Because once again, they could either be positive for it or negative. There was no carrier. So let's say we have a hemophiliac man that marries a healthy woman, what's the probability that they'll have any hemophiliac children? That is a 0%. All the sons would be healthy because males get their X chromosome from their mother. However, what this means is that all the daughters would be carriers. So in this case, the daughters, no matter what, they're receiving this X with the the hemophilia from the father. So, what this is trying to tell you is males get the X chromosome from their mother, and females get one X chromosome from their mother and from their father. Now, colorblindness. Like we said before, there's a wide variety of different versions. We've got red-green colorblindness, where red and green are perceived as identical, and colorblindness primarily affects 1 in every 10 males in the US and 1 in every 100 females in the US. Now just remember, males only have one X chromosome, so all X-linked alleles are expressed in males, meaning they either have it or they don't. There's no option for being a carrier if you're a male. So let's go ahead and do an example. Let's say a man with normal vision marries a colorblind woman. What is the probability that they will have a son who is colorblind? So first off, let's go ahead and figure out mom's genotype. Now we know that mom, well, the genotype for females is XX. If she's colorblind, that means she's going to carry the colorblind allele on both of her X chromosomes. And dad, this genotype here, would be XY. So we go ahead and set up our Punnett square. In our first box, we got XCX, resulting in a female who is a carrier. Why? Because she only has one of the colorblind alleles. In our second box, once again, we would get XCX. In our third block, we would get XCY, resulting in a colorblind male. And our other option would also be XCY, resulting in a colorblind male. So what's the probability that they'll have a colorblind son? So in this case, we're only looking at the sons. So what's the probability that they'll have a son who is colorblind? So we go ahead and focus only on our sons here. That means that no matter what, there's a 100% chance that the sons are going to be colorblind. 2 out of 2. So go ahead and tell me what you see here. Well, I'm sorry, that was very poor wording. I guess, you couldn't really tell me because, like I said before, I'm just nothing more than a recording. And you can't really carry on a conversation with a recording. So, what do you see here? This is a common test to see if you're colorblind for certain colors. So, depending on which one you're looking at here, in the upper left, what I see is 58. There's the 5, and there's the 8. In the upper right, I see an 18. Now, this is just what I'm seeing. You might be seeing something completely different. For the bottom left, I'm seeing 3 different options. I'm seeing the letter E, I'm seeing the letter L, and I guess you could also say that you could see the letter F. And finally, for the bottom right, what I'm seeing here is 17. Now, if you notice that you can't read some of those, hey, it's no problem. No problem at all. This happens. So finally, let's go ahead and look at another version here for our X-linked traits. This time talking about a bald man who marries a woman whose father was bald. So we're looking at male pattern baldness, another recessive X-linked trait. So what's the probability that they'll have a son with male pattern baldness? So let's go ahead and look at mom. We know that the genotype here has to be XX. Mom is a female. Now, marries a woman whose father was bald. So what we have to do for this is remember, females get one X chromosome from mom, one from dad. And considering dad was bald, he's only got one X chromosome, this one being the one that has our male pattern baldness. And if we have a bald man, so once we said if mom's father was bald, then he must have passed the X chromosome onto her. Dad, who is also bald, once again, they can either have it or they don't. There are no carriers. So dad also has the recessive trait for male pattern baldness. So we go ahead, set up our Punnett square, and let's see what happens. The first one we get would be XBX. Yes, that is a female with male pattern baldness. It can happen. In our upper right, we get XBX, resulting in a female carrier. In our third, we've got XBX, and in our fourth, just XY. So, what is the probability they'll have a son with male pattern baldness? Once again, we're only looking at the sons here. So, it looks like we have a 1 in 2 shot that the son will be bald. So, there's a 50-50 shot that the son will be bald or carry the male pattern baldness trait. Just like good old Dr. Kagan. You know, because he's bald. Well, once again, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to go ahead and close up shop for today. I'd like to thank you for joining us on this fine day, I guess. So, in summary, what we ended up talking about today was what type of blood you could potentially have, as well as the genotypes and phenotypes for both. And what we also talked about was the idea and process of X-linked or sex-linked traits commonly found on the X chromosome, and how those can go ahead and spread from the mother and the father to the offspring. Now remember, with X-linked traits, males, they either have it or they don't, because males only have one X chromosome, whereas females, being XX, they have two, meaning that they could be carriers in this case. So, without further ado, everyone, thank you again for joining us, and until next time, I will see you in the next video. Until then, you all take care now.